So dynamic leadership, it comes from, for me personally, years and years, both of training and teaching leadership, being a leader. So I'll kind of give you a little bit about my background. There's my smiling face. As I said, I am the VP of Professional Development here at Endpoint. Basically, what that means is I design learning programs, both in terms of their structure, content, things like that, in the soft skills areas. Endpoint actually deals both with soft and professional skills, project management, emotional intelligence, leadership, stuff that we'll talk about today, as well as technical skills. So we can kind of and you'll start to see this when we go into dynamic leadership, how we see this as a comprehensive approach to learning with organizations. I actually started my career as a high school teacher here in San Francisco, so I cut my teeth, so to speak, really learning about how people learn. And then after teaching for a few years, I founded a nonprofit here in San Francisco. I ran that for 3 years. I'm still president of the board there. So that was kind of my first exposure to being a leader. I didn't really have any previous training. I had no real idea what I was doing. I was just a young man with a dream. And so, after that, I was looking to figure out how I could fuse my leadership experience, my business experience, and my teaching experience. And so I moved into the training world, and the learning and development world. And so that's kind of where I've been since that time, traveling the world, teaching leadership among many other things. And so I worked at another company prior to here, and I started to feel that there was something missing in the way that leadership was approached and dealt with and thought about, especially from a development standpoint. There's a lot of programs and classes out there pertaining to leadership, and there's a lot of great, proprietary content out there. I wouldn't necessarily want to take away from anything that you've all experienced, and then some of the other leadership development programs that you may have experienced. It was more about the way that leadership was approached. So I want to just kind of start off hearing from all of you, thinking about some management and leadership scenarios that you might find yourself in, and what sort of skills that you see yourself utilizing in those situations. So I've got the chat open here. I'd love to hear from you. I'm going to throw a couple scenarios at you, and I'd love to hear from you what types of skills you think, in the chat bar, what you think you would need to do those. So we'll start with, just think of hard and soft skills, your technical, your technology, any of those types of skills, as well as soft skills. If you had to deliver a performance review, what type of skills do you think you would need? Okay, so communication, great. It's a great example. So you have to be able to communicate the message clearly, concisely, appropriately. I've got a crucial conversations adherent. Always a fan of crucial conversations. Yeah, so definitely need to not only be able to communicate, but to communicate about potentially challenging things, right? Providing feedback, knowledge of the framework, the performance assessment, and that Carlos tells me that you have a framework, which is good. I've certainly worked with organizations where there are less formal or less structured approaches. I always like having some kind of structure to bounce off of, so I think that's great. Another great example. So communication, some more technical knowledge of a framework that you might use. What are some other hard skills or soft skills? Coaching and mentoring. Very good, very good. Yeah. Any need for strategy, or maybe kind of long-term sort of visionary skills?
Yeah, I forwarded it to him directly, Eduardo.
Oh, looks like we've got somebody else on here. Okay. Delivering tough messages, strategic plans, right? Yeah, so you need a variety of skills in that setting, right? How about, and if you're going to repeat any, you can just say ditto. If you were giving a speech, maybe a company-wide speech or even a team presentation about a change in direction, what sort of skills do you think you would need there? Okay, persuasive skills. So another aspect of communication, right? As well as emotional intelligence, being persuasive. Understanding your audience knowledge level. So both some kind of relationship knowledge to draw on potentially, or analytical skills. If you don't know everybody in the audience, you might want to be able to infer what about those people, what they know. Business acumen, right? Some sort of financial knowledge. Okay, so a wide variety of skills, and I chose these two examples because they're two very distinct activities that a leader will probably experience once, twice, a million times in his or her, career. But I wanted to point out that there are some overlap in some of the skills that you're going to be putting into play. And when I started thinking about what was missing in a lot of the leadership programs, even that I had participated in the past or helped develop, was that there wasn't a recognition of how, each of these sort of use cases, a performance review or, a public speaking opportunity really utilized a lot of the same skills. There's a lot of, specific development of public speaking or, performance management. And that's usually where we try to develop people, is one particular area. And that didn't really feel like what it felt like to be a leader to me in my own experience and with a lot of the other people I started to talk to. And so I started to search for something a little more comprehensive and found it lacking. And so I kind of started with this core idea that leadership is really multidimensional, and that we should view it that way and we should develop it that way. And so, when I started working with Endpoint, that was something that we talked about very early, is how can we really look at leadership holistically and see it as this multidimensional, almost a way of being, and then try to work backwards from there and try to imagine how we would teach that or develop that in other people. So today, with that in mind, my main goal for you is to walk away with an understanding of what the dynamic leadership framework is. This is at Endpoint, the way that we view leadership and how to develop it. And I also want to give you the opportunity to begin that journey of developing your leadership dynamism. I want to give you a couple suggestions. Obviously, I want to tell you how we approach learning and leading, developing leaders in this way, and really set you on the path. So hopefully the next leadership program that you go through will hopefully be ours, of course. But in any case, it gives you a framework through which you can assess the effectiveness of those programs. So we're going to start with the concept, and I have to tell you a little bit more of the background of how the visual of all this came together, because I was kicking around these ideas of, all right, so leadership is all of these things, and There's a lot of interplay and overlap between the skills that we utilize. And I was kind of randomly reading an article about this Japanese philosophy called Ikigai. Has anyone ever heard of Ikigai? One person. If you haven't, I strongly urge you, if you want to live a long, healthy, satisfied life, go ahead and look up the Japanese philosophy, Ikigai. There's a bunch of studies around the world of the human lifespan and longevity and all the scientific research going into trying to figure out what it is, what sort of lifestyle could we possibly be living to help us live longer and more fulfilling lives. And so there's places in the world where this happens, and they call those blue zones. And one of the places where this happens is the Japanese island of Okinawa. And they have a whole life philosophy called Ikigai, which is about balance and purpose. And I was coincidentally looking through that as I was also trying to formulate a way to better understand and develop leadership. And so that's kind of where this whole dynamic leadership framework comes from. So this is a beautiful, if busy diagram. So I'm going to take you through it. We'll start with some of the outside circles, the four main circles, and then we'll kind of move inward and explain what all the arrows mean. But the idea here is that this is comprehensive, and like I said, it's drawn a little bit from Japanese Ikigai philosophy. So the idea in Ikigai is that we balance a lot of sometimes disparate or competing ideas in life, right? They could be the things that we love, the people that we love, the activities that we love, the work that must be done, the ways that we contribute to the world, right? All these different things are a part of us, inside of us all the time. And in that philosophy, they recognize there's an overlap between them. And I started to think about this, like, well, there's a lot of that in leadership too, isn't there? So I started to think about, well, what are the main things that we see in leadership, right? So you have to have some type of vision. Where are we going? What is this bright, beautiful future that I think we should be in? Do you agree with me? Do you want to walk there with me down that path towards this world that we're trying to create, this organization that we're trying to build, and the value that we're trying to bring to the world that we live in? So you have to have vision. Also, it's great to dream a dream, but you have to have some kind of technical skills at a minimum to be able to understand what would be needed, but also to perform the work that would be needed to get you there. So we have vision and technical skills, and we'll talk about the overlapping areas in a little bit here. And then on the other side, we have performance management, right? I might have these technical skills, but I want to be sure that they're being executed as well as they can when they're supposed to be executed in the manner in which they're supposed to be executed. And then at the bottom there, we have emotional intelligence, right? I need to understand myself. I need to understand others. And so you've probably seen all of these before. But I started to notice that there's a lot of ways where these things overlap at deeper levels into the activities that we partake in as leaders. So let's look back at the top next to vision. We have team development and team motivation, right? But you'll also see that this overlaps with the other circles of emotional intelligence and performance management. So there's times where we need to integrate emotional intelligence into our vision as well when we're communicating it, right? And that speech about change that we're going to bring to an organization. So if I have vision, I need to use that vision to help develop my team. I need to think about their technical skills that they need to execute. And I have to think about that when it comes into managing their performance, right? I have to figure out how my vision is actually motivating to them. Is it just my vision, or is it our vision? Is it a collective vision that we're building together? And so, again, there's this collaborative interplay between all of these elements. Performance management, and then overlapping with vision and emotional intelligence, we have performance feedback. A couple of you said, I think, some crucial conversations, right? Being able to understand what the person across the desk from you is probably thinking and feeling as you deliver that feedback on how that person's performing. When you think about how you develop that person, right? So emotional intelligence, technical skills, individual development, all these things are at play. And so a dynamic leader in an ideal setting would be able to recognize in each leadership moment which one of these sort of disciplines we need to bring into play to be effective, and which ones do we want to emphasize. There's some times where performance management isn't what's needed at the moment, it's empathy, right? But there's all of these things are always working. And so our goal with dynamic leadership is to start by teaching people just to be able to differentiate and identify in each leadership moment. Okay, maybe you're giving a performance review, or maybe you're giving a speech about change, but what are you also really doing? What part of your skill set or which tools in your toolbox are you pulling out that's really going to make you most effective in this moment, so it doesn't seem so chaotic and scary? I want to point out these arrows, because the arrows, these little dotted arrows, speak to what happens when we are in imbalance. If we rely too heavily or prioritize certain aspects or certain tools in our tool belts, and we lose the balance of bringing in some of the other ones. So we can start at that top left one: dreams and ability, but no attainment. So if I have a great vision of the bright, beautiful future I want to live in, I have all the technical skills and knowledge that I need to get there, and I have all kinds of emotional intelligence and empathy oozing out of me, but I'm not tracking and managing the performance, then we're not really going to be able to achieve anything. It all sounds nice, it looks good on paper, but I'm not actually able to achieve anything. Moving to the right, direction and competence, but no connection. Maybe I have a strong vision that we've created as a team. I know where we need to go. I'm managing people's performance. I've made sure that I and my team have all the technical skills, but I'm not able to connect with the people and create that team environment, right? So we're out of balance there. Bottom right there, inspiration and relationships, but feelings of failure. So I have vision, I know where we're going, I'm managing performance, I have strong emotional connection with people and my team, but we aren't actually equipped. We aren't competent enough at doing our jobs. So we'll probably encounter failure a lot and make the dream feel unattainable. And then bottom left there, capable and hardworking without satisfaction. This one this imbalance I've experienced a lot, especially in companies that need help with strategy and vision. We work with really smart people. I've heard that a bunch. We have perhaps a very structured and, well-designed performance management system. We all really like each other, but at the end of the day, we don't really know where we're going. So all of these are, again, overlapping, interlocking, and dynamic. And that's kind of how we're trying to build and work these leadership programs, right? We want them we want the people who go through them to recognize that as a leader, you really need to have all of these skills, number one, but then number two, you need to be able to recognize in the moment which of these skills you need to lean on the most. And so that's what dynamic leadership is, and that's what these development programs are all about. Underpinning all of this are a set of values. These are mostly our personal values as much as they are, I think, effective values to hold as a leader. Leadership is earned, it's not given. So you may have recently been promoted. Maybe you've been promoted many, many times. Congratulations to you. This doesn't mean that people will follow you where you want to go. So leadership is something that you earn, just like respect. It's not given to you just because you have a title. And this is something I really want to emphasize here. Your success is based on how well you empower others around you. Very, very often, and probably some of you have experienced this in your careers, their ego gets a little bit inflated when they get promoted to the leadership level or even when they move into management. And that can actually stifle the growth of the team. So when we talk about all these overlapping skills, we're not talking about them so that you can boss people around the most effective way that you can, or look really good on that stage when you're delivering that speech. It's understanding that you're on that stage delivering that speech and you're providing that performance feedback and doing everything that you're doing because your role, almost your function, is to empower other people around you. You are to invest in their growth. Empowering and growing others is what makes you a great leader. When I think about, on a personal level, all of the leaders in my career who I have felt were the most effective, it was because they made me feel a part of it. They made me feel great also. They helped me become great. And so this idea that we need to empower others, it's not just a way to make friends, it's really a way to be a better leader. And all this really kind of leads us to the idea that leadership is selfless. It's the easiest trap to fall into, that you're here because you're the best, smartest person, and that's what got you to this place. And maybe that's what got you to this place. But what's going to take you to the next level is not you, it's everyone else around you. So those are kind of the values underpinning what we do here. I'm going to just kind of give you a quick zoom in. In an actual program, we would flesh this out with you more completely, but I wanted to just give you an example. So let's look at team development, and then we'll talk about that imbalance. So what are we looking for when we think about how vision and technical skills overlap and create team development? It starts with having a strategic vision, right? It's more common than I would have ever expected. Originally coming from, being a high school educator and then in the nonprofit space, I think I had this vision of big companies having all these really effective ways of creating strategy, and was kind of surprised to see how rarely that occurred. So having a really strong team vision that comes through in the way that we handle ourselves, that we have our conversations, right? So when I talk about the bright, beautiful future that I'm trying to live in and go with all of you together, I'm also talking about it as it relates to our IT team, right? And those technical capabilities that we have. So it's not just building a better product or providing a better service, but also what that means and how that includes the ways that we will achieve that dream with our technical capabilities. That we track that performance against the vision, right? Are we actually creating the value for the world that we intend to create? And that's not just measured in, the bottom line, right? That's really looking back out into the world and asking ourselves, is this the value, the vision that we intended to bring to the world? Because in my personal experience, if you got into business to make money, you're missing the most important points, right? It's really the value that you bring that nobody else can bring but you to the world, to your customers, whoever that may be. And then being able to make real-time adjustments based on that team performance, right? So I can look at the technical skills and say, these aren't up to snuff. Or maybe even have the knowledge of the technology to say this system is not up to stuff. But we need to look at our performance against the vision and ask those hard questions. Why isn't this happening the way that we think it should? And then most importantly, developing mentor relationships within the team. So I can look at different people on my team and say, okay, great. So you've got really strong technical skills on this particular platform. This person, not so great. Maybe you can work with that person a little bit, kind of share how you gain that knowledge, how you develop those skills. But that other person is actually really good presenting to top executives. So what I'd love for you to do when you're working with that other person to share how great you are at, Excel or whatever technical platform, is that you learn from that person what he or she is thinking about when she's presenting to executives, right? So identifying the differentials in the technical skills on your team, and then building mentorship connections around those within your team. Okay? So that's kind of just some examples of how and where these things overlap and the way that we think about them, right? So I wouldn't just send somebody to, a technical training on something if I couldn't tie that to, strategy and vision. Just an idea for looking at this little imbalance here, this little dotted line, right? How do we make sure we don't get those imbalances? Well, we have to make sure our corporate department and team and individual goals align, right? So there's a big vision that we're all working towards. Are all the activities that we're involved in actually working toward that vision? If not, we're creating a bit of meaningless in the work, right? If I can't connect how my work helps contribute to this greater world, then it's hard for me to say that the work that I'm doing is important or that we'll ever get to it. So we think about how we can use feedback, motivation, team building to make sure that we're connected to that vision as often as possible. It could be daily, informal, formal, but the vision is what's driving my conversations as a leader with my team. Right, the work that you did this week was great because it helps us on this project, and that project is helping with this program, which we believe will take us to that next level. Okay, well, that all sounds good. So I want you to think about now, I'm kind of going to re-ask the original question that I asked you, and go ahead and let me know in the chat bar. If you had to plan the next 6 months of work, which of these aspects of dynamic leadership do you think you would need to consider? You can go ahead and let me know. All of them. Some one of you saw right through me. Anybody thinking, yeah, there's probably one I wouldn't need? Okay, so great. Okay, cool. So we've got pretty much, okay, well, we've got one vote for not necessarily technical. So one thing I would challenge you on, will not name names, is if you are going to have to be utilizing systems in the next 6 months of your work, are those systems up to snuff for the work that you will need to do? And are the people on your team reasonably competent enough to achieve those goals over the next 6 months? So you don't have to answer that right now. It's a much deeper question that probably involves a lot of meetings. But I would argue that you'll probably be using all of these to some degree. So congratulations to all of you. You just got through step one, which is being able to see the thing that I saw, which is all of these things are constantly in play all the time. The next step, and we may or may not be able to answer this question today, but I'm wondering if you could try. If you had to think about the next 6 months and guess which of these skills you would have to prioritize, because that's the next step, right? It's being able to see the leadership moment. Which of these am I going to lean on? All right, so for Carlos, it's vision for sure. And that's a big one. I often, if I had to supersize one of these circles, I feel like vision is the one for me that kind of ties it all together. But all right, team motivation. And all of you are obviously coming from different businesses, some of you in different places in the world. So far be it for me to correct you. Emotional intelligence. Okay. Yeah. So, and you would find that out as you go through that work. And a lot of, I think, just to give you, advice for free, the things that you might think about it is self-reflection. You could even do that now once you leave here today, is to think about, in the past week, where have you utilized some of these these different concepts? Which ones were you prioritizing, and what was going on in your organization that caused that to happen? It's this level of awareness that we're trying to develop so that you become faster and faster and faster, so that eventually in the moment you say, aha, I am in this moment and I need to use these 4 skills in this way, and I'm going to prioritize this, and this is how I do that. So a lot of the development comes from both learning how to recognize and prioritize, and then also making it authentic to you. So I'm going to teach you how we do this here at Endpoint. We're getting close to the end here, so and then we'll open up for Q&A. I'll actually kind of share with you a sample program that we have, and then we'll do some Q&A. So we start by doing a 360 assessment. This is just a quick kind of visual report out that you would get. So we would assess starting with actually all 8 of those competencies. So you would also have team motivation, performance feedback, all that stuff. And tell you which areas you already seem to be pretty strong in, because that gives us a few insights. Number one, it tells us where we don't really need to develop you. Maybe you've already got your technical skills are amazing. We'll use this graphic as an example, but your emotional intelligence may be a little bit off. So we would sit the way that you see yourself, your own personal assessment, and then that of your peers next to each other. And where are the differences in perception? Maybe you see yourself as being strongly emotionally intelligent and your team says something else. So we're looking for, first of all, the disparities, excuse me, between you and how everyone else sees you. And then just at the highest level, where do you really need development in? All of our programs, they're not really out of the box. I'm going to show you kind of the laundry list that we pull from. But the idea would be to figure out where are you already out of balance, and then build a training regimen that works around that. So we target those key areas, right? We train in the core concepts. We personally feel it's important to align them with your company values and strategies. So again, when I show you some of the stuff a little bit later, we usually tailor that content to use your languages, whatever the way that you see yourselves and where you're trying to go. We try to make sure that that language exists in the content as well. So we're all kind of rowing in the same direction. And then we reinforce that through ongoing adaptive learning, and that comes in a variety of different forms, anything from on-the-job assignments, coaching, scenario practices via email. There's a variety of ways, but our reinforcement program makes sure that the learning happens not just in the classroom. So if we did an online class like today, this for our class, myself or another instructor would approach you later and ask for your feedback, or we know that you're going through this right now at your organization. How do you think this performance feedback or team development plays into it, and see if you're connecting the ideas to the work that you're doing, so we can then adapt our development approach to you. And then in an ideal world, of course, all this stuff would come into balance, and you would be kind of ready at any moment. And then if you so chose, and we think there's a lot of value in this, would have ongoing coaching and mentoring, right? Because you might be brought into balance for this moment in your organization, go through a huge change, and everything falls out of whack again. So our coaches and trainers are kind of themselves trained to help you recognize an ongoing conversation where you might want to focus again. So at a sort of foundational level, our dynamic leadership program has 4 levels, but again, this is all something we can tailor and customize to you. And we do it in pretty much any way you can think about. Instructor-led training, we can come to you, we can do it live online. I always like instructor-led training. I think that's the most effective way. But again, we want to make sure that training and that knowledge moves on outside of the classroom. So we also have e-learning, coaching and mentoring, and like I said, that adaptive reinforcement, those on-the-job assignments, those weekly challenge emails, things like that really continue to make your brain deal with the ideas, so that you don't lose them just because you had a class last week and you never had to think about it again. So I'll kind of take you through the 4 levels, again, high level. And of course, it doesn't, this is just if I were to take a brand new cohort who just got promoted to managers and take them all the way up to C-suite level. But we would obviously customize this. Before we start reading this too much, each of those dots you may note corresponds to, vision, performance management, emotional intelligence, technical skills. So just to kind of share with you how those concepts are approached in each of these courses. But before I go any further, each of these courses is tightly modularized. So within that, we can also, once we assess, your leadership group, figure out, okay, we probably want this tiny module from that one, and we'll kind of pull from there. So manager, leader, or both. Again, if you're a new manager, kind of making that distinction between what is a management activity, what is a leadership activity. Something as cheap and technical as run meetings the right way. I suspect there's more than one of you in here who's been to far too many meetings that could have been emails, and so that's something I curated myself a long time ago, and I'm happy to share some of that stuff with you. Culture, performance, culture, motivation, and performance, figuring out how to invest in your team and build that team culture. And then when we get to the higher levels, we start talking about company culture. But performance management 101, right now we're working with an organization to build their performance management program, and they thought that's all they needed, so that's fine. Technical skills and leadership, so bridging the gap, right? Thinking about your technical strategy. So how am I going to, A, have a vision about the future, but B, consider all the technical requirements, right? And that includes the systems, technology, as well as, technical skills like project management, right? What are some of the places that we're going to need to beef up around here? Emotional intelligence 101, very simple. We all kind of probably heard of emotional intelligence by now. There's still some stragglers or some people who know about it but don't know how to practice it or develop it. So that's very fundamental stuff. And then developing others, having career conversations, creating development plans. Okay, so that would be the fundamental level. And again, we can pull stuff out of here or even just tiny modules from one of these classes and put them in something for you. The next level would be practitioner. So more on vision and team and how to get the team to participate and co-create that vision with you. Are we being strategic? Learning to separate strategic and tactical activities, learning how to assess yourself and your organization in terms of how strategic you are and how you behave, and tips for how to bring more strategic thinking into your meetings and conversations with people. We have the sequel to Culture, Motivation, and Performance 201. So advanced performance and culture development. This is when you're starting to get a little bit higher up and your culture is not just maybe your team, but maybe a department, something in that nature. Advanced emotional intelligence. We actually look at 11 different elements of emotional intelligence. We have confronting conflict. So this is interpersonal. But then at the next stage, we have conflict mediation. So it's one thing to get yourself or to diffuse a conflict yourself. It's another thing to do it between other people. Women's empowerment, and actually women's empowerment is something that we would want to bring in at all levels. And we also have some diversity and inclusion training as well. Level 3 expert, this is, probably moving into, director, VP area, if you're thinking of the types of people that ought to take these. Planning your influence campaign. So it's one thing to be able to rely on the authority of your position, but the higher up in an organization, everybody starts to have similar amounts of power. I think I saw somebody we're all big dogs now, right? So it's using that soft power of influence, and we would teach you how to build a long-term plan for how you're going to build your influence. Strategic planning and execution, managing other managers, identifying skill gaps. Again, all of these have within them content that we can modularize and recombine based on the imbalances or areas of need that we would see in a 360. Principles of leadership communications. This is a lot about question structure and communication structure. So it's not just what you say, but how you say it. And can you put thought into the way that you construct your communication in ways that challenge people, that inspire people. And this is, starting to get into C-suite, but I would never tell anybody not to take a course if they weren't C-suite. Yeah, maybe you'll get there someday. Thinking about your leadership legacy, right? So already trying to think about what do you want to leave behind as you leave your career, and thinking about that now. Leading across boundaries, vertical and horizontal boundaries exist in an organization. So we talk about that and how to move people through them. Motivation at scale. It's great to motivate a team. What about a department? What about an organization? These are hard questions to tackle, but important ones, I think. Continued innovation, how to create innovation teams, innovation conversations and structures, and then succession planning, how to get out. So again, all of these can be kind of picked apart and recombined. All of our content's modularized. And really, we would kind of help you figure out what you've got going and what we can kind of bring in to help with that. Briefly, just to kind of give you a visual of how this works. Again, we start out with a 360 assessment so we can figure out how you see yourself, how others see you. Is there a difference in where are you most developed? Are you strong technical? Maybe need a little help with emotional intelligence, whatever that may be. And then we all of our kind of learning processes start with preparation, right? So it's going to start kind of like we did today at the beginning of this webinar with a question to get your head in the game, to get you to reflect on what you already know, to create a foundation for learning to build from. So we're trying to connect you with what you already know, and then we would go through some type of course or series of courses. And then comes practice. All the stuff that we do comes with on-the-job practice and support from our learning team. So you might, for example, be assigned to go actually work with your team and build their career development plans, right? And give that to us, and we'll provide you feedback. You can always reach out for help. My employee said this. My employee has no career goals. How do you get through those conversations? We want this to be an ongoing. We want to be a partner with you in your development. So this is not something where we show up and leave. And then reinforcement. So again, like I said, weekly challenges, and you can kind of decide the cadence. If you don't want to hear from Endpoint every week, you don't have to. But some kind of ongoing way for your brain to continue to engage with these ideas. And then lastly, a lot of our programs have certifications. Certainly that 4-tiered model that I just showed you, there would be a certification for each level. We also have smaller certifications if you just want to take maybe one of the units. You can kind of choose your own adventure through the world of leadership, and really any of our other programs. We apply this model across all of our training. So that is that in terms of how the system works. And I think that's it. I'm going to put up my this email here. You can always ask us any questions. Actually, if you want to write down mine, it's Seymour. But yeah, I want to open up and just hear from people. I got some questions coming in already.